And I think too many people set an insanely high bar for themselves of wanting to, create so much content everywhere all the time. And then it just feels like you're on this never ending rat race of creating content.
Business Casual.
Welcome to Business Casual from Morning Brew. Business is everything, and everything is business. We have convos with people you know, and some you may not know yet, to make business less intimidating. Because money talks, but it does not have to be dull. I'm your host, Nora Ali. Now let's get down to business. We talk a lot about creators on our show. It's clear that they love what they do, but a recurring theme is that it's hard to navigate the money side of it. How do you get paid for creating content? How much should you get paid? And most importantly, can you make a career out of it? I'm often left wondering, is it actually possible to sustain a living, meaning earn a regular income, save for retirement, and plan for the future, as a creator? Today, we're going to find out exactly how creators can best prepare themselves to survive the long haul. I am really excited to bring you this episode of Business Casual because I am a very avid consumer of creators, as I'm sure most of you are, whether it's on TikTok, on YouTube, or even on Morning Brew. More and more of my friends and colleagues even are becoming creators and pursuing content creation as a full-time career with strategies that definitely run the gamut. We'll hear from experts in monetization, marketing, and strategy, and even from a successful longtime creator, who all offer real tips on making money from your brand and planning for the future. So without further ado, we bring you Creators 101. Surviving the long haul. Today's Business Casual is brought to you by Real Vision. We bring you some pretty insightful business stories on this podcast, at least we think so. But if you're looking to dive even deeper into the world of finance, business, and the global economy, Real Vision has got you covered. No bias, no BS. That's what you'll get with all of the on-demand videos and analysis at Real Vision. Plus, Real Vision gives you access to financial info that was largely kept behind closed doors, the stuff that's actually important and affects your wallet, investments, and your future. Ready to become a real expert in investing, business, and the economy? Get started with Real Vision's Investor Psychology course at realvision.com/psychology. That's realvision.com/psychology. Tisha, this is part of a broader episode that we're doing about how to survive for the long haul as a creator. So a couple other voices we have on this episode is a brand monetization expert and also an executive from a creator platform. So you are our creator voice. So we want to learn from you how you've created a sustainable career out of your brand. Yes. And I've been following you for a while, so I'm fangirling just a little bit. So we appreciate you, Tisha. So to start, can you just tell us your name and what you do for a living, what your preferred job title is?
Sure. So my name is Tisha Allen, and my job title is a golf media personality, although it definitely goes much broader than that, but we'll leave it at golf media personality.
Amazing. So what does that mean exactly, golf media personality? Can you describe exactly what you do as a creator and maybe summarize your presence on socials? What are your top platforms, approximate number of followers if you can?
Okay.
What is Tisha on social media?
Okay, so for among platforms, I am alive on all the platforms. My main one is Instagram and TikTok, but you can find me on Twitter, YouTube, Triller, whatever else there is, I'm on. Golf media personality for me, it entails so many things. I work in golf TV, I work in golf commercial. Whether it's a photo shoot or whatever, they need someone, they have me. I was a former professional golfer. I am a social media content creator within the golf space and sports space, and an instructor, a fitness instructor as well, not just golf instructor. So golf media personality to me encompasses all of, it's an umbrella to cover all those different things. Anything golf, I'm there.
How did you arrive at that portfolio? Walk us through this journey of you were a golf pro, you
Yes.
decided to go all in on social media at some point, and now
Yeah.
you also supplement the social media with things like fitness and instruction, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
How did that all come to be, and how did you determine that portfolio?
It's wild because I do get a lot of messages on a daily basis from young girls that are like, I want to do what you do. Like, how do I get there? And I wish I just had one route for you. And there are other women in my space that have gotten here, but we all got here in such different levels. So for me, my journey was I've been a competitive golfer since I was 7. I began golf at 3. That was the very beginning of my journey. And then I was a communications broadcast journalist major in college, and I knew that speaking in front of camera was something I always had a passion for if it wasn't going to be on the LPGA tour. And so those two things combined really built my foundation of where I am now. When I was in college, I graduated in 2015. There was no, I'm going to study to be a social media content creator. Like that wasn't a thing, right? So for me, it was just continuing to try and become the best golfer. And then in 2015, I hopped onto Instagram. My first post ever was literally of like a dog wearing a tutu. I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. What do you do? Document whatever's in front of you. And then I started documenting my journey. And then that's how it all happened. I went viral at a very early stage in Instagram and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then I started to do trick shots and then that went viral. And then I did a dance trend before TikTok was a thing because I used to be a competitive dancer. And I remember thinking, how unprofessional is this of me to be a golfer and doing a hip hop dance? I was doing the Juju on the Beat challenge and it went off. And I remember just throwing my phone away thinking, I can't believe I did that. Any potential sponsor I have is not going to want me as a professional golfer. I hop on. It has like over 150,000 views. I had to scroll all the way back to find it. But at that time on Instagram where there was no, there was no means of like you have to pay for your views and things like that. It was just a very raw platform and I went off and I just started growing and growing and growing. And that's where I was like, okay, I guess this is a new thing. Is social media here to stay? I don't know, but it's going to help supplement my career. And that was my main purpose. And that's how it all began.
So at first it was just supplementary, like you said, but what was that pivot point where you decided I'm not going to continue being a pro golfer? That's not going to be my main source of income. Now it's all about social media. What was that point?
Yeah. So, like, as I mentioned, I began in 2015. And then in 2018, I hit this kind of fork in the road where I was like, I am now getting offered deals and social media gigs, but all those checks are going to my entry fees for professional golf and my travel fees, my caddy fees. And it's not easy as a female golfer to break even. I was constantly breaking even because social media was supplementing my professional golf career. And then I was losing all that money. And I was like, well, what if I put one down? And it was a really hard decision for me as someone who has always dreamed to be on the LPGA tour because I felt like I went through an identity crisis. It was always, yeah, social media is there, but I'm a professional golfer. And at the time, social media and an influencer was still not looked upon very positively, right? Like an influencer, people still, when you say that term, you're like, oh, okay, I can't take you seriously. And for me, that was like a very hard hit on my pride. In 2018, I decided, what am I waking up enjoying every day? And it was creating. And at that time, it was starting to become a more solidified space. It was clear that social media was going to be around for a long time. We didn't know what was going to happen. TikTok happened, right? Like, which is so wild to think because that really escalated my career. And so 2018, I told my team and my sponsors, I said, I don't know if I want to play professionally anymore. This is a grind for me. And I'm just bawling on the phone on all these calls because this is who I was. This is my identity. And they were like, I remember coming to Puma. I've been with Puma for the last 5 years and I was like, hey, you guys, I don't think I want to play professionally anymore. If you want to drop me, I understand. Thank you so much for supporting me. And they were like, um, okay, anyway, so can you still post and can you still model and can you still show up to our events? Can you still create? And I was like, yeah, that would and the excitement I
Wow.
had was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't need to play and like kill myself to play. This is amazing." And that's when I
Mm.
knew I was like, "Wait, I love this." And so 2018 was a very big year for me and went all in and that's literally my name, Tisha All In and never looked back.
So you started, as a creator or creating around golf, you got some brand deals. Were you doing any financial planning in the early days where, okay, these are my revenue goals. This is how much money I need coming in through brand deals to survive for the long haul? Do you have retirement savings? Like, what does the financial planning look like for Tisha?
So I mean, as a professional golfer, when I was kind of coming up into the scene, there was no plan besides how much money do I have in my bank account? Can I afford this next event? And that was kind of the game plan from 2015 to 2018. And when deals started really becoming a thing, I signed into a new agency that focused more on the media outlet of things versus the professional athlete part of things. And that really changed my perception. And when I signed with my agency, Jess, my agent, we are not only we have an amazing bond, and she is also an amazing friend, which I think is very important for anyone who's a creator to have a great relationship with your team. If you feel like you're a little fish in a big pond, find someone else. That's my biggest advice, first of all, because you and your team, you guys are working together to do the same thing, and that's to supplement yourself. And so make sure you're on a team that you feel like you can very much trust one another, because if you don't, then that partnership is not going to last. You'll have legality problems. You don't want any of that. So that's step one. Um, in terms of financial planning, gosh, it's just been a whole lot of, am I doing this right? Who can I talk to an older adult to help me? And like I'm like messaging other creators. I'm like, what did you do for taxes? Like, you're totally learning. But for me, I started to create financial goals in 2018 of like, okay, is this going to be sustainable? Can I make X amount of money this year? And I would hit it every year. And so I think that was the first step, is making sure, like, can I make X amount of money that I want to supply my lifestyle without having to have another form of income, without having to have another job. Because for me, when it was professional golf, it was social media, but I was also working as a cart girl. Like, at what point can I drop the real job, right? I mean, being a creator is a real job, but you're living gig to gig. And so that became that. And for me, it just became a whole lot of budgeting. And it's not like when you're a creator, you are working off, check by check, gig by gig. So for me, it was like I could, in 2018, especially, it was like, wow, I am negative this month. I have no gig at all. But next month, I know I have a gig that's going to give me $5,000. So what am I going to do with that? How am I going to budget that? And there was a lot of that until I got bigger deals where I'm like, okay, now I can maybe hire on an assistant. Maybe I can get a manager now. Maybe I can have this. And it was, but everyone is so different, right? It's about truly what is your lifestyle.
That's really great advice. And it sounds like you found resources, trusted
Mhm.
people around you early on, which, we've talked to other creators where that's not the case. And they
Yeah.
find, or managers will find them and take advantage of them. So I love the advice that you gave around early on finding people who you trust. So as you're creating your content calendar, I'd love you to walk us through what that looks like. So
Yeah.
I do want to reference one of your most viewed TikToks, which I've watched several times. It has nearly 11 million views. You use
Okay.
this super popular sound, and as you dance to it, it's the and when you bamba, da ba da, the whatever, whatever. And then you're dancing to that clip, and the caption or the text on top says, "When a straight friend tells me they think they're bi curious." So this has nothing to do with golf, but it is a very highly viewed TikTok. Everyone's simping in the comments. There was one comment that said, "I'm a gay man, but you have me questioning myself." So,
That's so
how
funny.
do you decide that that's a TikTok you're going to make? What's your process of finding those viral sounds, deciding
That's
that
so
you want to
funny.
talk about your sexuality in this one
Um,
versus golf? Walk me through it, please.
Yeah, yeah. I love TikTok as a platform because you just watch and you just get so engulfed in it. And for me, because I'm in such a different niche, right? Like golf, LGBTQ community combined, sports, trick shots, whatever. So when I see a sound or a TikTok, it's easy for me to be like, oh my gosh, that hasn't been done in my world. How do I bring that to life? And when it comes to the LGBTQ space, happy Pride Month, everybody, by the way. Um,
Woohoo.
and and so for me, I am very I'm very specific about where I allow my pillars to live, right? So for me on TikTok, I noticed at a very early stage that the LGBTQ space is actually quite popular, and it's very accepted, and it's very young, and it's a younger generation, and I love to speak to that younger generation because on Instagram my audience is a lot older and it's mostly male, and maybe it's not the best space for me to just be like rainbow flags, and I don't like to stuff my beliefs towards down anyone's throat. I want to be respected for my ability, and part of me is my sexuality. And so on TikTok, I have allowed that the LGBTQ space to be one of my pillars that I talk about. And it's honestly
Mhm.
allowed me to meet so many people because of it. And so when I heard
Yeah.
that sound, that you want to bumba sound, I was like, oh my gosh, do you want to bumba with me? And also very relatable to my personal life, okay? Because I'm like, this has been an actual situation. I'm like, you never know what's gonna hit. Sometimes, like, I'm
Yeah.
editing something for like 5 hours, and I'm like, this is gonna be great. And then, of course, this trend that took me, like, I was like, I don't know, I was getting ready for like a Christmas party, and I just do this quick thing and it just goes off. And I have married women, I have like all these people DMing me, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm open to anything, whatever you want. Like, I'm like, we're gonna have to do this more often, I guess.
That makes me so happy. So okay, so you have a viral video like that. You didn't think it was going to go viral. Do you feel this pressure to capitalize on it? Like follow up
Yeah,
with something, or does it Yeah, so what do you do with that? You have a video with
absolutely.
11 million views. Like what's the next step?
So, for anyone who has a video that pops off for whatever their ratio of followers are, like, go off of it. Like, respond to a comment within that and then do it again, or do the same trend over and over again. So, I don't know if you saw, but for that specific trend, I did that same trend responding to a comment another 3 more times, which allowed that video to live longer and for the next 2 videos to go viral. Like, I think that, you heard the first one was you want to bamba. That's if a straight friend says they're bi curious, and I'm gay. And so I was like, okay, that went off. And the next one said something like, I'd love to like marry you or something. And so I did one wearing white, and I was like, okay, you want to bamba, you want to marry me? And then someone said, I'd love to take a golf lesson from you. So I'm in a golf outfit. I'm like, okay, you want to bamba, you want to do this? And it just went off. And you want to create longevity whenever you have a spike of views, and it just gets you popping.
Yeah. Okay, so on this idea of creating longevity, it feels like a lot of pressure to use that moment to continue to make content. And now that it is your job to keep making content, do you try to find ways to repurpose content across platforms? I know you mentioned your audience is different on Instagram versus TikTok, so not everything is going to work across platforms. But how do you ensure that you're not going to burn yourself out and create some of these efficiencies to be able to reuse content across platforms over time?
That is a really good question. I think all of us creators experience burnout because not everything can be repurposed. I think the best thing about TikTok is that because there is Instagram Reels, you can mostly for the most part bounce it back and forth, and it's going to receive well. Like, if you go on Instagram Reels, you're basically watching a lot of recycled TikToks, to be honest, just without the watermark. But for myself, like, when I'm actually going through like a slight burnout lull right now, but it's because I'm traveling and working, and I'm having a hard time balancing trying to figure out the trends on TikTok and whatnot. But I think for anyone who is experiencing burnout and trying to live on all these platforms, it's okay if you can't focus all at once. Like, if you feel like, you know what, my Instagram is a little low, I don't have enough content there, but I'm just really relating to TikTok. These are the quick trends that I can do, and I don't have to like be all crazy and edit all that much. I could just do a quick trend and I relate. Okay, focus on that. Like, focus on one thing at a time. Or you feel like, you know what, I don't want to put my makeup on at all. I'm just going to share my opinions on Twitter, and that's where I'm going to live right now. Okay, do that, because that's still allowing you to grow in some way versus like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to step back completely. Like, if you still feel a little bit of passion towards one platform versus another, put your eggs in that basket for now. And for myself, I have a lot of different pillars that I focus on, whether it's golf instruction, golf trick shots, dancing, other sports, speaking, TV. So when I get burnt out, I find like what's exciting me right now, and I switch my focus to whatever that pillar is. And that could be within a different platform in itself. So don't pressure yourself to live on everything. I think we all go through that when, as a creator who's like trying so hard to grow, but you just got to count the little wins.
This this question is around your moonshot idea. So what is your biggest ambition, your
Okay.
wildest dream?
Okay.
This is your chance to shoot your shot and put it out in the world. So
Can I say more
Tisha,
than
go for
one
it. Shoot
thing?
your shot.
Can I say multiple things?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll go on
Yes.
different levels. So, okay, I think one that's like kind of obtainable, but like it's still shooting my shot. Like, I've always dreamt of being on Dancing with the Stars. that's been like, I like as a golfer to be on Dancing with the Stars, to like grow golf that way.
Yes.
And that would be amazing. So that's one. The next one would be any type of collaboration with J Lo. I just love her, and I feel like her essence. I am that. The way she talks about like her life and the way she views of creativity, like I feel like that's that. J Lo. I don't know how. If you want to learn golf, I don't know, but just please hit me up. Um, and then the last one, I don't know if this is possible because this really is a moonshot idea, but if there was like a bachelorette, like the show, like the Bachelor, Bachelorette, but for like the LGBTQ plus community. But I don't know how to logistically make that
Yes.
work because if it was an all girl thing, all the girls would just date one another, and I'd need to be like, hey, listen, I'm the Bachelorette. Can we refocus that energy? Only choose me. I don't know, but I feel like if that could be, very normalized, that would be really, that would
Mm-hmm.
be awesome. I think for like it can be still like a respectable, clean
Yeah.
show, but just love in different ways, But yeah.
It doesn't have to be a clean show, Tisha.
Okay,
Everyone
we
can
can do
hook up
it.
with each other, and that creates drama. That's what sells to the networks. I think we're on to
Okay,
something.
MTV,
Let's
sign us
develop
up.
this show
Okay.
together. Yes.
It's not
Okay,
ABC.
these are, yes, either Dancing with the Stars or this new version of The Bachelorette with Tisha.
I'm Wes Kao. I'm the co-founder of Maven, and we're a platform that makes it really easy for experts and creators to monetize their expertise by teaching online.
Amazing. So let's stick with Maven, Wes, to start. What does Maven exactly allow creators to accomplish? And specifically, how can creators utilize these cohort-based courses to monetize their brands and their reach?
When most people think about online courses, they think about video-based courses. So the kinds that you find on Skillshare, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, where there's no accountability, there's no interaction with other people. You kind of have to use your own internal fortitude to try to finish watching, all this content. And so the completion rates are super low. 6 to 10% of people who start these courses actually finish. And so cohort-based courses are the opposite. Cohort-based courses have a 75% or higher completion rate because they're all about community. They're all about learning with other like-minded people with set start and end dates. So the course might be 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, but you're learning with other people and there's much more of a sense of urgency and accountability. So Maven specializes in cohort-based courses. So Seth Godin and I, when we launched the Alt MBA in 2014, 2015, created this category that eventually became called cohort-based courses. At the time, we had no idea that challenging video-driven courses that were dominant at that time would create this whole movement towards more community-driven learning. And so with Maven, which my co-founder Gagan Biani and I and Shreyans Bensali started a couple years ago, it's all about making these courses much easier for creators to be able to build, run, and host without dealing with all the technical, logistical, administrative aspects that creating live courses often entails.
We have heard from other creator economy experts that it is important to have a specific skill or knowledge base or expertise to truly survive for the long haul as a creator versus relying on virality and happy accidents and that sort of thing, which we see more and more of now. How important is it to have a particular expertise and to hone that expertise to really make it long term as a full-time creator?
I think especially for knowledge influencers, it's super important. I mean, the barrier for entry now for being a creator is lower than ever, which is great for most people because, I think there's a lot of room for the pie to expand. And I think that the definition of a creator is also expanding. So you have creator founders, you have creator operators who are, full-time in-house, but also have a newsletter, or they also run a webinar series, or they have a podcast. And then of course you have full-time creators who monetize and make a living off of whatever their creations are. But really investing in your craft and thinking more holistically about your revenue stream is a great way to make sure that you're not relying on haphazard, incidental success to power your living.
So how do you do that? Think holistically about your revenue stream. Let's say you're a relatively new creator, you're starting to build your audience, and you decide, I actually want to start making money with my brand. Where do you begin?
I have a 2x2 matrix that I call the creator monetization matrix. And so on the x-axis, you have scale. So low scale to high scale. And the y-axis, you have price point that you can charge as a creator. So at the bottom, it's low price points. At the top, it's high price points. And so most creators tend to be over-indexed in a certain quadrant. So you might be doing a ton of free content. So you're tweeting, you're doing your free newsletter, you're making, podcasts, episodes, and you realize that you don't have a great way to monetize all of this great content that you're creating. On the other hand, there are a lot of creators who are in the opposite bucket, where they might be doing a lot of consulting, hands-on implementation, strategy work, working with clients. And so they're charging a high price point per hour for their, or per project for their engagements, but they eventually max out on the number of hours that they have in a certain week. So, and they realize that all of their great work is locked behind NDAs and closed doors. So they can't really show their work in more public ways. So that's a really common challenge for creators is, you're kind of over-indexed in one bucket or the other. And so by looking at this matrix, you can realize that, all right, maybe I'm monetizing in one way, but I need to be more public in building my audience, building my email subscribers, building my, followers on Twitter, or, building ways to grow distribution.
So I do want to get a little more specific on what these monetization strategies are themselves, because, we as audiences of creators online can tell oftentimes when something is a branded post or it's ads sponsored, and audiences, I think, are becoming more discerning. So what are some strategies to make sure you have recurring revenue, recurring monetization without impeding on the authenticity of the brand itself?
Yeah, great question. Today, creators make money in a couple different ways. So one is branded sponsorships. Another is advertising. Another is selling merch. And another is selling valuable products or experiences that your audiences get value from directly. So the first few that I mentioned really require volume. You need a huge number of subscribers for brands to want to work with you, or to, be able to make a living from ad revenue. And, if you're selling merch like hoodies and socks, you need to sell a lot of socks to be able to pay your rent. And so I think one thing that's really exciting that's happening in the creator economy now is the shift from 1,000 true fans to 100 true fans. So, the 100 true fans, the idea there is that you can have an even smaller number of core fans that you can cater to, where you charge a higher price point for the products that you're selling to them. And so that way you're not constantly needing to chase followers, subscribers, fans. And so cohort-based courses are a great example of just one product that's popping up in this category. And I think more and more will pop up in the next few years, where with a cohort-based course, you can charge anywhere between $500 per student to $5,000 per student. And the average prices that we see creators charge are $750 to about $1,500. So if you're charging premium products like this, or premium prices, you're able to really create an amazing experience for this group of diehard fans that is willing to pay a premium to learn directly from you. It's not like you need at $5 or $10 per month for a Substack newsletter even. It's a lot of work to need to create a weekly high quality newsletter, and you need a lot of subscribers at $10 a month. Whereas if you're teaching a cohort-based course, it's you might teach 2 to 4 times per year, right? Once a quarter for a couple weeks. And so it's, in terms of an ROI on your time and the amount of revenue that you can make for teaching for a couple weeks, we see creators making anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000 per couple weeks of teaching if they don't have much of an audience or no audience, to, if you have a big audience like Lenny Rachitsky, Pomp, Saho Bloom, you can make between $100,000 to $200,000 in just a couple of weeks, which is pretty nuts.
Yes, it is. And that's probably beyond what you would expect to teach a course to make, multiple magnitudes of a traditional income, of a teacher per se. So
we had a funny little anecdote. Sean Puri, teaches a code-based course. And he said that he made more from teaching his course last year than he did from his FANG salary. So it's definitely something that's replacing, full-time incomes.
But to create something that's outside of just teaching courses, and I love the state change method example that you laid out and the notion of making content more interactive. That makes sense. But if you're not teaching a course, let's say you're just on your social platforms, building your audiences, what's the best way to actually engage your audience long term and make, say, your tweet threads interactive? You have amazing tweet threads and have been able to grow your own Twitter account very quickly. But what are some tips and tricks to make it feel interactive when it's not as much of this face-to-face interaction on most of your socials?
I think the old way of thinking about content was thinking about, what do I want to write about as a creator? And then doing that. I think the new way is thinking about, what would my readers want to read about that I am also excited about? So I really look at it as a Venn diagram overlap of areas that I'm excited about, that I have expertise in, plus also that my audience would find juicy and interesting. So another framework that I have is that as an online creator nowadays, you have to be 50% instructor, 50% entertainer. And if you are just all one or the other, if you're all instructor and you're all, you're sharing great tweet threads, teaching things, but it's boring and it's dry and it's slow, there's no rhythm, there's no pacing, people are not going to want to read it. They're not even going to stop scrolling. They're just going to scroll right past you. But if you are 100% entertainer, you're kind of the living incarnation of a BuzzFeed listicle, right? Where you hook people in, but there's not a lot of there's not a lot of meat or substance that makes someone want to follow you and read more content from you. So by balancing 50% instructor, 50% entertainer, you really think about, how do I make this important concept that I think my audience should learn about, that I'm excited to teach, how do I make it juicy? How do I make it interesting? How do I hook them in? And if you think about all your favorite creators, whether they're on, Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, YouTube, they have a way of making topics more interesting than 90% of other people who also talk about that same topic, right? Whether that's communication or music history or crypto or management principles. There's a lot of people out there talking about these topics and have been for decades, but for some reason they are able to share, what I call a spiky point of view that is kind of, it's a bit contrarian, not contrarian for the sake of stirring the pot and riling people up, but they have a unique point of view that helps their audience think in a different way and stops them in their tracks long enough to actually share the rest of the story.
A juicy and spiky point of view. I like the adjectives, Wes. So you have spoken in the past, I was listening to another one of your interviews, about how difficult it is to reuse content on multiple platforms. Your personal example is you can't just copy paste an essay you wrote into a Twitter thread. It has to be massaged for the platform itself. How do you, as a creator, effectively create content that is sustainable across platforms without burning yourself out? I guess, what is the best way to repurpose content with intention to make sure you have the broadest reach possible for the longest amount of time?
I think the best way to do this is stepping back a little bit from the tactics of your content calendar or all the platforms you want to create content on, and really thinking about, what is the goal of your content? What is your content for? And also, what is your personality and orientation as a creator? So if you are a creator operator or a creator founder, you might be using content to share more about your category, right? And if that's the case, you might not need to be on 5 different platforms all at once because you are still operating a company, And I think too many people set an insanely high bar for themselves of wanting to, create so much content everywhere all the time. And then it just feels like you're on this never ending rat race of creating content. Whereas if you kind of narrow in on, okay, maybe our target customer is mainly on Twitter. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to start with a thread a week. That's basically what I did. For years beforehand, I had tried creating content on multiple platforms all at once, and it was just really overwhelming. And I would always do it for a couple weeks and then give up. But this time, I focused just on Twitter because that's where our target customers were, and started with something really simple, one thread a week. And I was able to maintain that over, several months, and I'm still going with that cadence. And I think that made a really big difference for concentrating our efforts in one area enough to really hit critical mass. So that's one. I think the second thing with knowing yourself and your personality, your orientation is setting yourself up for success by not following advice from people who are very different from you. It's kind of like getting networking advice from as an introvert from an extrovert, like, oh, just walk up to people, like, just like jump in and like say hi. And you're like, okay, like I can't, like that feels so wrong, right? So I feel like there's a lot of great advice out there about content creation, repurposing content, created by people who are natural sharers. They don't overthink their content. They have a reasonable bar for quality, and they produce something. They don't overthink it. They throw it out there. They know it's a numbers game, right? I think intellectually every content creator on some degree knows that, okay, it's about reps. I need to keep creating content. It's hard to guess what is really going to resonate with people and what's gonna hit, what's not. But I think for natural shares, it comes a lot more easily to just kind of hit publish. And then on the other hand, there are people who are maybe a little bit more self-conscious or kind of, overthinkers. So I am in this bucket of overthinkers. So this is a very known problem to me. Yes, like, and we've seen many of our peers and friends like just publish stuff that like, I have drafts sitting for 7 months. Like I have articles that took me 5 months to write, and if I'm honest, it actually took like 2 years. So one of my favorite stories is when Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan were talking about their songwriting styles and how long it took them to write songs. And so Bob Dylan says to Leonard Cohen, I loved Hallelujah. It's obviously a global sensation. How long did it take you to write that song? And Leonard Cohen says 2 years. And says, Bob, I really loved, one of your songs. How long did it take you? And Bob Dylan says, about 15 minutes. And Leonard Cohen is just absolutely floored. And he says, okay, lied. It actually took me 5 years to write Hallelujah. So I think it's just such a wild story of two super successful musicians, totally different styles, both can work. And so for me, like I don't, sign up for super intense content creation schedules because that's not who I am. And I wouldn't be able to create high quality content in the way that I want to. So I set up a cadence that works for me. So I think really like not copying blankly what everyone else is doing, and instead figuring out how can I create content that works with my natural orientation. You're going to be able to do it for a lot longer. And content is a long game. So you want to be able to not burn yourself out.
So it is more about consistency than quantity, because I have seen TikTok creators, the ones who want to give you advice on how to get viral on TikTok. They say quantity, just post, but that's not sustainable. So you're saying come up with a schedule that works for you, just be consistent about it.
Yeah, I think if the post works for you and you can do it for more than 3 weeks without hating your life, then you should definitely do that. So that's again, like that extroverted, like natural sheer advice where like they're assuming that you're not gonna, hate yourself after 3 weeks, right? So like if posting, instead of 5 times a day, posting, a couple times a week means that you can do it for 3 years and be excited about it, like I would opt for the latter.
Yeah. I will one day get comfortable with tweeting things out that have typos, but I reread everything I ever put on socials. There's some happy medium there.
I'm Sam Yam, and then I'm the CTO co-founder at Patreon.
Wonderful. So you started Patreon in 2013 when the landscape of creators was quite different from what it is today. But what inspired you to launch the platform in the first place? What did you feel was missing from the creator economy of the time?
Yeah. If you go back and sort of just look at our history the way we've talked about it, so Jack, my co-founder, was producing a lot of content on YouTube. And I think the key thesis we had was that creators were just undervalued, like creators and artists. And so you had folks who are generating hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of views. And sometimes we like to describe this as like football stadium size audience crowds. But then you would get an advertising paycheck, whether it was from YouTube or elsewhere, for a few $100. And at that time, our belief was that both the work and the people sort of valued these creators a lot more than that. And so how could we build a sustainable way for artists and creators to get funded directly from their fans?
So what is the creator experience like on Patreon? What are you deciding when you use the platform? What are some of the models you can adopt?
Yeah, I think we're overall agnostic about how we can help and get creators funded. But the way that we're set up today is enabling creators to, again, per the original thesis, build up membership and subscription payments for their audiences and effectively those fans that really, really appreciate the creators and their work.
I would imagine that there was some resistance at first for creators who weren't familiar with sort of charging their fans anything, or fans who weren't used to paying for elevated content from the people that they followed. How did you get people on board in the first place?
Yeah, it honestly was a struggle. For us, it felt like a no-brainer, given our belief both that creators valued the work that they're producing, and the platforms at that time were not, at least from a monetary perspective, valuing it correctly, that there should just be creators coming over in droves. And in the early days, I remember right before we launched, Jack had put together a whole sort of spreadsheet of peers and creators that we knew that we thought could really benefit from our platform, from Patreon, and reached out to these folks. It was a list of like maybe 50, 60 people, and every single one of them wasn't interested. Different reasons, a variety of perspectives, I think, including, hey, I'm not sure I want to ask my community to like pay me anything. And so we ended up just launching with Jack himself, who had created a music video at the time, and then his now wife, but fiance at the time, and then their roommate. And so it was just those three creators who all knew each other. And then once Jack launched, right, I think the platform resonated deeply with the audiences of these creators. And in particular, there were folks, ultimately supporting and subscribing to Jack's Patreon, and he was seeing a few thousand per song that he was putting out. And then from there, I think once creators saw what was happening, and that there was certainly this willingness to join memberships and subscribe to creators directly, we just started seeing creators sign up organically.
And creators who probably want to be able to predict what their revenues will look like beyond, tomorrow, beyond the next brand deal. How would you say Patreon contributes to this idea of having a longer term steady growth for creators versus relying on randomly going viral on TikTok and capitalizing on that singular moment?
Yeah. So the way we think about, and again, the original thesis was one of building sustainable revenue, one where you could consider, being an artist and creator as a career. The way we sort of think about it right now is to build out for the long term as a creator, and the sustainable way is to really have ownership and control over the aspects of your business, certainly a big one being like access to your audience and community there. And so I think, especially now in this currently very volatile market, I follow a YouTuber, Graham Stephan, and he sort of talks a lot about finance, and he's very open about his earnings. And so in like a recent video, he was talking about how his overall CPM rate, so the amount of money he gets paid per 1,000 views, has dropped maybe about 25%, which doesn't sound terrible, but that in conjunction with overall online behavior sort of plateauing and dropping a bit, he's seen his earnings drop almost in half now on YouTube. And I think when you're dependent a lot on this advertising nature of businesses, that can certainly fluctuate a lot based on like other companies and corporations' actions. And so, Graham in particular was describing how you're even seeing companies like McDonald's drop their marketing spend by 50%, and if you're involved in like the crypto space, like Coinbase dropped 98% on its marketing budget. And so for us, what we really want to do, because in those cases, oftentimes creators don't have a lot of recourse. They don't have access to like the email addresses of their audience members. They can't reach out directly to people. Even when you have a bunch of followers on Instagram or YouTube, you're not guaranteed to reach them all when you make a new post. Is we are trying to build out a platform that actually gives ownership and control so that you are able to, it may be the case that there are still market conditions where people are behaving differently, but you can try to do new business ideas, you can look for new monetization opportunities, and you own and have access to the audience that you've built out over time.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget how much you're giving up if you're relying on a platform like YouTube where you're beholden to their algorithms and their changes in the model, which might impact you directly without even being able to anticipate it. But we hear from creators a lot that it's difficult to know how much to charge for things, whether it's how much you should expect out of a brand deal, especially if you're new to it. So a lot of young folks who are going viral and getting large followings. How do creators on Patreon decide the right price point? What are the factors that go into that?
Yeah, I think it's unique case by case, but I do think a lot of creators sort of look at other creators who are successful on the platform as guidance. In general, what we try to encourage is that creators really do value the work that they're outputting more. So, a lot of folks sometimes want to start where they're maybe not pricing correctly, how much their audience really does value both like their exclusive content or access to the communities that they get in subscribing as part of their membership. And so we encourage folks, we see like $5 and $10 as really strong tier price points that actually have a lot of demand and end up generating sort of meaningful engagement from the community too.
And Patreon has resources to sort of help you determine these things. And I was reading Patreon's creator launch guide, which mentions this in step 1. It says, the membership model requires significant investment from both creators and patrons. Not every creator is ready to pursue the membership model, and not every audience is engaged enough to convert right away. What would make a creator ready to adopt the membership model, and what would make them perhaps not ready to do so?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to emphasize there is that there still is a need to build up an audience. And so Patreon doesn't act as a substitution right now for a lot of these platforms where you're originally building up your fans, your community. But what we do focus on is helping create an environment, a space where people can truly engage and love you, right, as a creator in many ways. And so when you ask this question around like what makes a creator ready, I think it's at that point where they want to sort of build a deeper relationship with their community and then start looking at how they actually want to convert this into a sort of a paid, ongoing, sustainable business.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of discussions as well on the idea of scaling to a super large audience versus really focusing in on an engaged smaller audience. I know you know Lee Jin of Atelier Ventures, and she popularized this notion of 100 true fans, where the model is to offer elevated premium content for the smaller, super engaged group, and then you can charge a higher price point for that. Does Patreon embody that model where it's maybe focused on a smaller, more engaged audience versus just trying to have the biggest audience possible?
Well, certainly I think the community that you're building on Patreon is different than the sort of mass eyeballs and sort of that treadmill of having to produce more content in order to pull in more eyeballs from like an algorithmic feed. I will say like over time what we've noticed is that the willingness, and this could be for a multitude of factors, including people being more comfortable to pay creators directly, and also creators understanding like what communities value. We've seen the amount paid by patrons increase over time. Originally, it was something on the order of like $10 a month, and we've seen it slowly creep up to around $13 a month. And of course, it varies too from creator to creator. We're also noticing that, again, as this idea of subscribing directly to creators is becoming more ubiquitous, that there are patrons just subscribing to multiple creators. It wasn't the case originally that the majority of our revenue or the amount of money being sent to creators, and now that exceeds over $1 billion per year just on Patreon. But it wasn't the case that that came primarily from people supporting multiple creators at a time. But now over half of the revenue that does come through is from patrons subscribing to multiple creators at once. So I think just overall, this concept of subscribing and becoming members to creators that you care deeply about is becoming more and more common.
I feel like the biggest change in the last couple of years, just as far as creators, is obviously the rise of TikTok. Has anything meaningfully changed on Patreon, given how impactful TikTok has been in just creating new influencers, new creators? And there's also this fear of losing that virality, losing that popularity that you've gained unless you keep churning out lots and lots of content. Has anything really changed for Patreon in light of the rise of TikTok?
Yeah, TikTok, I love TikTok as an audience member, as a consumer. And I think it's amazing what it's done because it sort of follows this trend of both democratization of like creation, by being able to provide so many tools that really encourage creativity, that connect you into a community. And again, the trend is just one of like technology becoming less and less an obstacle for people being able to create. And so like now that you have access to your mobile phone and the camera on there, really anyone can start being creative and building an audience. But to your question of like how that impacts other aspects of business, there are other trends that I think become more problematic for creators over time, especially with like the advent of platforms like TikTok. So I think TikTok for the first time had the average hourly viewership exceed that of even YouTube last year. And then I think they also announced they have like 1 billion monthly actives. So it's been rapidly rising. But part of that, I think, engagement that they're getting from audience members is because they're not really focused on just promoting individual creators, but rather like, I think it's very well known through their AI and algorithms, they're able to recommend you the best set of videos. And so what ends up happening is a lot of these creators build up audience members, but unlike the other platforms, which already don't give you full access to your community, to your direct fans, you have even less access to them because just by publishing a piece of content, you're not guaranteed to reach your followers, especially on TikTok, where the recommendations are purely based on that platform and what they think that you're going to appreciate more. And so you end up with a lot of different creators who are looking for ways to move their audience members off of TikTok, even though they're growing, a lot of their audiences there, to platforms where they either can monetize or at least have access to those members. And I'd add like on top of that to when they try to do this, when they make calls to actions, those videos immediately get suppressed. And so they have a lot of difficulty even trying to pull people out. Just because the algorithm will determine that piece of content is not as engaging and doesn't keep people on the platform as long as maybe other pieces of content.
Yeah, and the notion of burnout has come up a lot as well because you can't always repurpose, to your point of the TikTok watermark on IG Reels, you can't always repurpose the same content and you're just churning out piece of content after piece of content. Does Patreon maybe help to lengthen content shelf life for creators where maybe they don't feel like they have to be on the hamster wheel of content creation?
Yeah, the way we like to maybe describe this is that instead of having this, I like your description of a hamster wheel, but this constant need to feed the feed on these other platforms is that we're very much focused on much more intimate and meaningful connections among your audience. And so versus like just churning out content, it really is much more oftentimes like a participatory creation where you have fans who care deeply about your work, engaging, whether it's like through commentary or just engaging within themselves in the community. Oftentimes we have creators who are connected to like their Discord, and they see community members really rally together around their work, such that you're not always on to the next piece of content, but rather you can engage more deeply with your audience in those moments. And plus, that they care deeply and they're supporting you too.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight as to the sorts of creators that maybe perform the best on Patreon, the most popular creators, whether it's, we heard from a guest before that you have to have an actual real skill in order to survive for the long haul as a creator. Is there any sort of voice or type of audience, choice of platform that seems to lend itself to sustained success?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think like all creators are skillful in whatever capacity if they're seeing some success, right? Whether even if it's not like a skill refined in like the classical arts, whether it's violin or piano, like us, I think there's a lot of aspects around community building and understanding what resonates with just other like-minded people that is really important. And to your question of what makes an effective membership subscription campaign for creators, the largest proxy that we've seen is just the love of your community towards you and your work. So it's not tied to a particular sector or even like dimension of category. Oftentimes, we've seen huge successes in things that run the variety of like true crime podcasts to there's one of my favorite ones is this Humans of New York, where you have like Brandon posting these stories of just everyday peers around you, and it's so fascinating just hearing the narratives of like their lives. But I will say, like, we have seen, in past years, whether you want to call it resurgence or a lot of success in the podcasting space in particular. So it's interesting that we're in podcasts. I think part of that has to do with both the level of depth of the relationship that people feel when you're like talking into their ear on a continuous basis. Like you really seem to understand the inside mind of that host or that creator. And I think there's also an aspect to it, unfortunately, of like frequency where you just have more touch points over time, and that also builds a closer relationship.
What about specificity of niche? I guess you sort of already answered it. It's more about the person and how much fans just engage with you as a human versus what your specific niche is. But do you think it's important to sort of pick a lane almost?
Yeah, so I think there's different dynamics on this. I think if you're very widespread, like you have, Mr. Beast, who just appeals to a large, younger demographic, you still have within that segments of super passionate individuals. And then I think like sort of what you were calling out, if you're focused on a particular niche, then you'll have people that realize there isn't a lot of content out there for them. And when they find that creator that gets them, and that content deeply resonates with them, then they form a very, very strong connection, which is perfect for a membership and building out a community around that too. So I wouldn't say you have to necessarily pick a lane, but I think it makes sense as a creator to decide what resonates for you and what you're going to be passionate about. I think that's maybe the key part to this, because again, especially given markets and a lot of different things, I think there is an aspect of there's a lot of hard work in being a creator. And maybe a lot of the perspective is the glam side of things, but if you just listen and you talk to these creators, they tell you how much of a grind it really can be at times. And if you don't truly love the type of creation and work you're doing, it's going to be a tough road and unlikely to succeed too.
Amen. I think that's a great note to end on. Sam, thank you so much for your insight and for joining us on Business Casual.
Business Casual.
If you like what you saw and you like what you heard, you can listen to the entire episode of this podcast, Business Casual, anywhere you get your podcasts. And please go ahead and subscribe to the Morning Brew YouTube channel and go ahead and click on that alarm bell, that thing right there, so you can be alerted anytime there's a new video.